The attic air hung thick with dust motes, illuminated by a single shaft of sunlight piercing through a crack in the boarded-up window. Marcos coughed, waving a hand in front of his face. His grandfather's house, now his, held the scent of forgotten things, old wood, moth-eaten fabrics, and the faint lingering aroma of pipe tobacco. He was here to sort through the remnants of a life well lived, a task made all the more poignant by his recent loss. His grandfather had been a quiet man, a collector of curiosities, and the attic was his personal museum. Among the boxes of dusty books and antique tools, Marcos found a heavy, leather-bound photo album. Its cover was worn smooth, the title embossed in faded gold lettering, "Family Portraits." He lifted it carefully, the leather cool against his fingertips. Back downstairs, in the relative clarity of the living room, Marcos opened the album. The first few pages contained formal portraits of stern-faced individuals in Victorian dress. As he turned the pages, the photos became more casual, snapshots of picnics, holidays, and family gatherings. Then he noticed something odd. In several of the later photos, faint, almost imperceptible shadows lingered in the background, ghostly figures that seemed to fade in and out of focus. He squinted, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the shadows remained, unsettling and enigmatic. He felt a chill, despite the summer heat radiating through the window. This album, he sensed, held more than just family history. It held a secret. The chill that had settled over Marcos in the living room lingered, even as the sun climbed higher in the sky. He closed the photo album, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. He tried to rationalize the shadows in the photographs. Perhaps it was a photographic error, a double exposure, or some other technical flaw. But a nagging feeling persisted, a sense that there was something more to it. He decided to examine the photos more closely, under better lighting. He carried the album to the kitchen table, spreading the photographs out before him. As he scrutinized each image, the shadows became more distinct. They were no longer just smudges of darkness. They had taken on more defined shapes, vaguely humanoid, always lurking in the background, as if observing the subjects of the photos from a distance. In one photo, a family posed on a porch. The shadow stood near a window, its form partially obscured by a curtain. In another, depicting children playing in a garden, the shadow was visible behind a tree, its shape almost blending with the foliage. The consistency of the shadows, their presence in multiple photos taken at different times and locations, defied any logical explanation. A shiver ran down his spine. He felt as though he was intruding on something private, something he wasn't meant to see. He picked up one of the photos, a portrait of a young woman with sad eyes and a melancholic expression. As he stared at her face, he felt a sudden chill, and a faint whisper seemed to brush against his ear. He couldn't make out any words, but the sound sent a jolt of fear through him. He dropped the photo as if it had burned him. His heart pounded in his chest. He looked around the empty kitchen, but there was no one there. The only sound was the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. He tried to dismiss the whisper as his imagination, a product of his grief and the unsettling nature of the photographs. But deep down, he knew that something strange was happening, something that defied explanation. The shadows in the photos were not just tricks of the light. They were something more, something other. The unsettling whisper in the kitchen had ignited a spark of morbid curiosity within Marcos. He couldn't shake the feeling that the photographs held a story that was trying to be told. He decided to delve deeper into the history of the album, hoping to find some answers. He started by examining the back of the photographs, searching for any clues. On the back of one of the older portraits, he found a faint inscription in faded ink, "Hawthorne Family, 1898. The name resonated with him. He vaguely remembered hearing his grandfather mention a family with that name who had once lived in the area. He turned to the internet, searching for any information about the Hawthorne family. After several fruitless searches, he stumbled upon a digitized archive of old local newspapers. He typed in Hawthorne and fire, and a series of articles appeared, detailing a tragic house fire that had occurred in 1912. The articles described the fire in vivid detail, the flames engulfing the large Victorian house, the desperate cries of the trapped family members, the heroic efforts of the local firefighters. The reports listed the names of the victims: Thomas and Eleanor Hawthorne, their 3 children, and a housemaid. The address of the house was also mentioned: 12 Elm Street. A chill ran down Marcos's spine. He recognized the street name. It was just a few blocks from his grandfather's house. He cross-referenced the address with old city maps he found online, tracing the evolution of the neighborhood over the past century. He discovered that 12 Elm Street no longer existed. The original Victorian houses had been demolished decades ago, replaced by modern apartment buildings and commercial properties. There was no physical trace of the Hawthornes' home, only the faint echo of their tragedy preserved in the yellowed pages of old newspapers. The more he learned about the Hawthorne family, the more convinced he became that the shadows in the photographs were connected to the fire. He felt a growing sense of dread, but also a strange sense of responsibility. He felt compelled to uncover the full story, to understand the connection between the photographs, the fire, and the ghostly presence that had entered his life. The whispers in his apartment had become more frequent, more insistent, as if the past was trying to break through into the present. The search for 12 Elm Street proved fruitless. The address no longer existed, replaced by modern apartment buildings and commercial properties. Marcos was disappointed, but not surprised. He had expected the house to be gone, but it still felt like a dead end. He returned to the library, determined to find any other information about the Hawthorne family. He spent hours poring over old newspapers, historical documents, and genealogical records. He found a few more scattered mentions of the family, but nothing that shed any light on the tragic fire. The lack of concrete information only fueled his curiosity. He felt a growing sense of unease, as if he was being drawn deeper into a mystery that he wasn't prepared to solve. The whispers in his apartment became more frequent, more insistent. He would hear them at night as he lay in bed, the disembodied voices swirling around him, fragments of words, half-formed sentences, like echoes from a distant past. He also began experiencing vivid flashbacks, brief but intense visions of scenes from the Hawthorne family's life. He saw the children playing in the garden, the family gathered around the dining table, the warm glow of the fireplace in the living room. These visions were not his own memories. They were fragments of the past, glimpses into the lives of the people in the photographs, as if their memories were somehow seeping into his own mind. The line between his reality and theirs was blurring, the past and present merging into a single unsettling experience. He felt a constant sense of being watched, as if the ghosts of the Hawthorne family were always present, observing his every move. He started to see shadows in the corners of his vision, fleeting glimpses of movement that vanished as soon as he turned his head. The creaks and groans of his old apartment building, which he had previously ignored, now sounded like footsteps and whispers. He was becoming increasingly isolated, his friends and family growing concerned about his erratic behavior. He was trapped in a world of shadows and whispers, a world where the past and the present collided, where the line between the living and the dead was dangerously thin. Marcos's isolation deepened as the days turned into weeks. He spent his days and nights immersed in the world of the photographs, his mind consumed by the haunting presence of the Hawthorne family. The whispers became more frequent, more insistent, their voices weaving a tapestry of sorrow and regret. He began to see the shadows more clearly, their forms no longer vague and indistinct, but solid and tangible. They moved through his apartment, their presence palpable, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. One night, as he lay in bed unable to sleep, he felt a cold touch on his arm. He jumped, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned to see the woman from the photograph, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with tears. She stood silently by his bedside, her presence as real as the air he breathed. Marcos was paralyzed with fear, but he also felt a surge of compassion. He reached out to her, his hand trembling, but she stepped back, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not of this world." Marcos's heart ached for her, for all the lost souls trapped in the limbo between life and death. He wanted to help them, to find a way to release them from their torment. But he knew that he was not the one to do it. He was just a man, a mere mortal, trapped in his own world of grief and confusion. The woman turned and walked away, her figure fading into the darkness. Marcos lay awake for hours, his mind filled with thoughts of the Hawthorne family, their tragic fate, and the ghosts that haunted their memory. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, a need to do something, to help them find peace. But he also knew that he was not strong enough, not brave enough. He was just a man with a camera and a heart full of sorrow. A violent storm ravaged the city. Lightning bolts cut across the night sky, briefly illuminating the deserted street below. The wind howled, shaking the windows of Marcos's apartment and causing the trees to bend as if in reverence. The sound of the rain lashing against the glass created a hypnotic, almost deafening rhythm. Marcos sat in his armchair, wrapped in a blanket, watching the storm through the window. The electricity had gone out, plunging the apartment into darkness, lit only by the occasional flashes of lightning. Suddenly, a deafening crash shook the building. A lightning flash illuminated the apartment for a fraction of a second, and Marcos saw. In the middle of the room, standing in the ghostly light, was the woman from the photograph. She was no longer a pale, distant image. She was solid, present, her eyes fixed on him with a frightening intensity. The air turned icy cold, and Marcos felt a chill run through his body. The next lightning bolt illuminated the apartment again, and Marcos saw the terror in her face. She was pale, her lips trembled, and her eyes were filled with tears. She reached out towards him as if pleading for help. "Fire," she whispered, her voice weak and hoarse, almost muffled by the sound of the storm. "The fire took everything. We couldn't get out." Another lightning strike, and Marcos saw the scene unfold before his eyes. He saw the house in flames, the flames licking the walls and engulfing everything in their path. He heard the cries of children, the woman's screams of terror, the crackling of burning wood. He saw the dense smoke suffocating them, the darkness consuming them. The vision was so vivid, so real, that Marcos smelled the smoke and felt the heat of the flames. The woman wept silently, tears streaming down her pale face. "We're trapped here," she whispered, "trapped forever." The light from the next lightning bolt vanished, and with it the vision. The woman was still there, standing in the middle of the room, her eyes fixed on Marcos. He felt a deep compassion for her family, for their suffering. He understood now. The shadows in the photos, the whispers, the visions. It was all a plea for help, a silent cry for liberation. The storm seemed to have opened a portal, allowing the past to invade the present, revealing the terrible truth behind the Hawthorne family's tragedy. The storm raged on, mirroring the turmoil within Marcos. The woman's desperate plea, the fire. "It took everything, we couldn't get out," echoed in his mind. He now understood the source of the whispers, the chilling presence that had invaded his life. It wasn't malevolence. It was a cry for help, a desperate attempt to be heard, to finally find peace. Driven by a newfound purpose, Marcos decided to delve deeper into the history of the Hawthorne fire. He returned to the local library, determined to find any surviving records that might shed light on the tragedy. He spent hours poring over microfilms of old newspapers, city archives, and land registry documents. Finally, he stumbled upon a small, almost forgotten detail in an old fire department report. It mentioned that the fire had started in the nursery, a room on the second floor at the back of the house. The report also noted that a window in that room was found to be jammed shut, possibly trapping the children inside. This detail struck a chord with Marcos. He remembered one of the photographs in the album, a picture of 3 children playing in a room filled with toys. In the background, partially obscured by a curtain, he could now clearly see the outline of a window. He rushed back to his apartment, retrieved the album, and examined the photo under a magnifying glass. The details were faint but discernible. The window in the photo was identical to the one described in the fire report. It was the nursery window. A chilling realization dawned on him. The shadows he had seen in the photographs weren't just random distortions. They were the lingering imprints of the Hawthorne family, trapped in the moment of their death, forever reliving the horror of the fire. The woman he had seen during the storm was Eleanor Hawthorne, the mother, desperately trying to save her children. The jammed window, a seemingly insignificant detail, held the key to their tragic fate. He felt a profound sense of sadness and responsibility. He knew he couldn't physically change the past, but perhaps he could help the Hawthornes find peace, to finally break free from their spectral prison. He decided he needed to visit the site of the former Hawthorne house. Even though the original building was gone, he felt a strong pull to that location, a sense that it held the key to resolving the haunting. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to help the trapped spirits find their way to the other side. The storm outside began to abate, the thunder receding into the distance, the rain softening to a gentle patter. Inside Marcos's apartment, the ghostly figure of Eleanor Hawthorne remained, her presence less intense now, a lingering echo of the terror and sorrow he had witnessed. The shared vision of the fire had forged a connection between them, a bridge across the divide between the living and the dead. Marcos understood now that she wasn't seeking vengeance or causing harm. She simply wanted her story to be told, her family's memory to be honored. He knew what he had to do. He spent the next few days immersed in research, meticulously documenting everything he had learned about the Hawthorne family. He gathered the newspaper articles, the fire department report, the old photographs, and the fragments of memories that had been shared with him during the storm. He created a website, a digital memorial dedicated to the Hawthornes. He wrote about their lives, their home, and the tragic fire that had claimed their lives. He included the photographs, carefully restored and enhanced, so that their faces could be seen clearly, their stories remembered. When the website was finally complete, Marcos felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in weeks. He published it online, sharing the link on local history forums and social media groups. He watched as the story began to spread, people commenting, sharing, and expressing their condolences for the Hawthorne family's tragic fate. As the story circulated, a noticeable change occurred in his apartment. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, the whispers faded into silence, and the feeling of being watched vanished completely. One evening, Marcos sat at his desk looking at the original photo album. The shadows were gone. The photographs were now just photographs, capturing a moment in time, a glimpse into the lives of a family long gone. He felt a sense of closure, a feeling that he had helped the Hawthornes find peace. He had given them a voice, and in doing so, he had found a measure of peace for himself as well. The weight of his grandfather's passing, which had been compounded by the haunting, felt lighter now. He understood that grief was a process, and that sometimes helping others find peace could be a way to find your own. He closed the album, a faint smile gracing his lips. The echoes of the past had finally found their rest.